The nation watched as pro-Trump extremists stormed the Capitol.
Days of unrest and protests continue to rock Myanmar.
Home at last, and a joyful welcome for Mahmoud Hussein after years in prison.
I put up my hands, I said, I'm pressed.
You see how hazy it is? That is all tear gas.
We have to confront them head on because this is going to be a long fight.
Oh my God, yes! I need to go down.
I'm pressed. Please.
I was just sprayed in the face with pepper spray.
Never before have we seen such protests on the streets of Cuba.
The pandemic has actually made press freedom worse.
Women protested for equal rights. Several male journalists covering the protest were savagely beaten.
America's multi-billion-dollar Afghan.
This is a staircase to the platform.
The people of Minsk have reached their boiling point.
With attacks on press freedom growing daily around the world, the courage and the work of journalists is more important today than ever before.
Maria Ressa and Dmitry Muratov are receiving the Nobel Peace Prize for their efforts to safeguard freedom of expression, which is a precondition for democracy and lasting peace.
Hello, everyone. I'm David Muir with ABC's World News Tonight, and it is a true honor to be here with you tonight, both online and in person. As we navigate this time together, the fight against this global pandemic, issues of equity remain all over the world in this fight. Within our own industry, the battle against disinformation, propaganda, and of course, the deepening political polarization across the globe. And we're certainly not immune here in the U.S. And so we gather here tonight to protect press freedom and to salute and support journalists working under the most difficult circumstances imaginable, yet still never giving up. So welcome to the International Press Freedom Awards of the Committee to Protect Journalists. On the face of it, the job of a journalist is simple, to gather and then report the news. But for many reporters in today's increasingly repressive world, the very act of asking questions can be a crime. During the COVID pandemic, reporters have been jailed and intimidated just for collecting data on the numbers of infections and hospitalizations. Many governments have not been truthful about their failure to tackle the disease. Some have used the cover of COVID to stifle political dissent. Journalists looking to cut through that propaganda and misinformation, of course, pose a threat to those who are trying to control the message, and those journalists are at constant risk of being silenced. Today, the world's jails are filled with record numbers of journalists. They're in jail, and this constant effort by some leaders to deter others from pursuing facts that, of course, would contradict the official narrative. Governments have weaponized technology to track a reporter's every move. They have polluted the information landscape with so many lies that even when journalists unearth the truth, it's often not believed. It's no exaggeration to say that for many reporters in this world, there has never been a more dangerous time to be a journalist. That is why I, like you, support the Committee to Protect Journalists. As Taliban forces rolled through Afghanistan this summer, CPJ's emergency response team was at the forefront of international efforts to help independent journalists escape to safety. When the military seized power in Myanmar and began rounding up journalists, CPJ reported on the abuses and supported those who fled. Tonight, we will hear the stories of brave Burmese journalists. CPJ is also honoring journalists from Belarus, Guatemala, and Mozambique. The journalists will be joined on screen by well-known reporters and supporters of press freedom as we honor their work and celebrate their success. Reporters need fearless publishers to finance their work. Tonight, we will witness the story of one such media owner who has taken on the might of the Chinese Communist Party. I am honored to introduce this program. I am sure you'll be inspired and strengthened in your determination to join CPJ in the fight for press freedom. And remember, if you would like to make a difference by supporting CPJ and the great work they do, every dollar you give will be matched up to $250,000 by a generous grant from the Knight Foundation. You can donate at ipfa.cpj.org or text CPJ to 41444.
Journalism continues to be a dangerous profession, among the most dangerous professions worldwide. Last year, more than 274 journalists were imprisoned simply for doing their jobs. This year, 13 journalists were murdered in retaliation for reporting the news. In many cases, the criminal groups and states who sanction murders and arrests do so with impunity. They face no consequences for stifling the voices of those who simply seek to tell the truth. This cold and troubling reality is why the Ford Foundation is so deeply honored to support the Committee to Protect Journalists and the responsibility you take on around the world. CPJ is a critical lifeline and champion for justice and freedom for reporters and editors, photographers, and many more in the media worldwide. To the journalists who are joining us on this occasion, and on behalf of everyone at the Ford Foundation, I want to thank you for your courage, for your resilience, for your unwavering commitment to tell the stories that need to be told, that protect and advance justice and freedom for us all. Thank you for all you do.
As an Iranian journalist who has seen the inside of a Tehran prison myself, I was excited when the Committee to Protect Journalists gave its Press Freedom Award last year to Mohammad Mossadegh. But at that time, he was in danger and could not speak to us openly. Being summoned to serve more than 4 years in prison for the crime of exposing financial corruption, Mohammad fled Iran for neighboring Turkey. There, he faced the prospect of being sent back. Thanks to CPJ and others, Mohammad is safe.
Hello everyone, and thank you for joining me as we celebrate extraordinary journalists working in extraordinarily difficult environments. Journalists are public servants. That's the guiding principle of Matias Genta, the editor of an influential investigative newspaper in Mozambique, and it has cost him dearly. The government doesn't want journalists digging into corruption and human rights abuses. It has tried to prevent reporters from covering an Islamist-led insurgency in a natural gas-producing region vital to the economy. Assaults and threats, though, have not deterred Matias from giving people the information they need to make democracy work. And clearly, the public appreciates his service. When the newspaper's offices were attacked, readers rallied to his side to ensure that his critical voice was not stifled.
O jornalista ele está inserido no meio de uma comunidade. O servidor público número 1 é o jornalista, porque ele tem essa capacidade de análise, tem essa capacidade de crítica. O canal de Moçambique escolheu estar no meio desta comunidade que se chama Moçambique. Nós temos um problema muito sério em Moçambique, que se chama corrupção.
In Mozambique, you've got a newspaper that is very much seen as being part of the community and that people want to read and are doing a job. And Mateus's paper is exactly that.
Estamos aqui para sermos um instrumento de emancipação das pessoas. E esse é que é o papel que nós acreditamos ser da imprensa.
The Committee to Protect Journalists saw journalists who were being detained incommunicado. And we were seeing this happening in a region called Cabo Delgado, where there's an insurgency.
ISIL-linked fighters besieged the town of Palma on Wednesday.
And there's been a massive displacement.
Reports say some civilians who tried to escape have been killed.
People are really suffering.
Difficult to get a clear picture of the situation in Mozambique's Cabo Delgado province.
As poucas vezes que nós fomos a Cabo Delgado, as histórias que foram contadas são simplesmente arrepiantes. Alguém que te conta dizer que eu vi o meu pai a cortar-lhe a cabeça.
It is quite a rich province in terms of gas in particular. The government wanted to keep a lid on things. Journalists who were reporting on these things, including Mateus, were actually targeted by the forces. Mateus Gente is the sort of journalist who knows if we talk about corruption, you need to expose what you have to expose. When you're exposing people, you make enemies, right? I recall seeing a message from one of our partners saying that the officers of Canal de Mozambique had been firebombed. I was just talking to him 2 days ago about something, and now they've attacked. I tried to contact him, and I couldn't reach him. I turned to the WhatsApp advocacy group that I'd set up for Mozambique, and the person who heads one of our partner organizations was actually at the police station with Mateus. No one had been harmed. That was my big fear. Yeah, it's a Sunday, the newspaper comes out on a Wednesday. I didn't know if there was anyone in that newsroom.
Não podia se salvar absolutamente nada, não tínhamos tempo para abraçarmos-nos e tal, choramos.
You lose your office. Everything in there is burnt, and yet you have a deadline, and you've got a newspaper to get out.
Todos disseram que para nós acreditarmos no que nós estamos a fazer. E me recordo de uma frase que me tocou bastante, disse assim, nós não estamos errados. Quem estão errados são os chefes de famílias que ordenaram o ataque ao jornal.
The following day, they set up this newsroom on the sidewalk, and where did they get the equipment from? Ordinary people actually were there giving second-hand stuff just to assist them, and a newspaper came out of the streets that Wednesday. And the only thing inside the paper that referred to what had happened was an incredibly strong editorial. They effectively told people, we know that this could mean death. You're not going to stop us. We're going to continue. We're going to continue to expose corruption. And that's what the newspaper has done.
Nós acreditamos na imprensa, na liberdade de imprensa, nós acreditamos na democracia. No fundo, pode-se queimar jornais, mas não se pode queimar o pensamento. A ameaça de fogo apenas faz multiplicar aquilo que esses incendiários mais temem, o espírito crítico.
Marginalized communities often lack access to natural resources, but they are also denied another precious commodity, information. The problem is particularly acute among the Maya peoples of Guatemala, who have long suffered dispossession and genocide. That is why Anastasia Mejia Tariquez co-founded a radio station to bring reliable news to the underserved groups, particularly Indigenous women in her home region. Being a journalist in Guatemala, however, sometimes comes at a price: personal freedom.
Bien, quiero referirme en esta hermosa mañana sobre las situaciones que se están dando en nuestro país, Guatemala. La Corte Suprema de Justicia están pasando situaciones tristes.
Somos la voz viva, bien lo digo, la esperanza y la voz del pueblo. Xolabás Radio nace en el año 2013. Xolabás TV, cuando nace a nivel departamental, no había otro medio que transmitía en vivo, que ahora en las casas pues encienden la televisión y nos ven.
Indigenous communities in Guatemala have faced conflict, have faced genocide, have faced displacement. In addition to that, really don't have a lot of space in traditional media outlets, either as reporters or as subjects of the reporting.
Eso ha sido la labor tan importante que vino a hacer Xolabás, de trasladar esa información, de esos conocimientos que se han ido perdiendo, que se han ido quedando, compartiendo la información y la ceremonia para muchos hermanos nuestros.
In Guatemala, it's been incredibly difficult for community-based reporters to get that recognition that what they're doing is even journalism.
Vemos en este momento está saliendo humo dentro del Palacio Municipal.
In Guatemala, community reporters who may be the only person on the scene at some kind of altercation are then accused of participating in the very incident that they are actually documenting. As a result of the coverage she had done of this demonstration, she's charged with arson and sedition for being in the same place as a protest and for reporting on it.
Yo fui a cumplir mi papel periodístico haciendo mi reportaje y ahora soy culpable de todo. ¿Y eso por qué? ¿Y con qué base? ¿Y con qué prueba?
She was detained without a warrant. She was held in pretrial detention for over 5 weeks in violation of Guatemalan law. So we reported on her detention, and then we continued to do advocacy on behalf of her case. We've seen over the course of her career how she has been seen as a threat who undermines the power of local officials. And so this incident was an opportunity to diminish that power that she had and silence her even more.
El sistema opresor nos quiere intimidar. El sistema opresor quiere seguir engañando.
A nivel de nuestro país, ser periodista es algo que nos tienen que perseguir. Siento que se está regresando los años atrás, en donde a los periodistas se les mandaba a matar por dar a conocer la noticia y los acontecimientos.
She does continue to face criminal charges. She's not allowed to leave the Department of Quiché. She has to appear in front of authorities every 2 weeks. She essentially has a version of a restraining order that doesn't allow her to approach the mayor, who is a source of a lot of her reporting.
Ahora ya no se nos mata, sino que se nos manda a callar, se nos encarcela, se nos persigue y se nos criminaliza por dar a conocer la noticia y la verdad. ¿Qué me motiva a salir adelante? Las abuelas y los abuelos. Me motivan mis hijos. Quiero dejar para ellos un mundo diferente.
The journalists we are meeting tonight are an inspiration. They battle the rich and powerful, often with little more than a camera and a notebook. We owe our undying support to them and the thousands like them who advance the cause of free expression just by going out in the streets to report. In doing so, many put their lives on the line, and nowhere has that been truer this year than in Afghanistan. When the Taliban rolled unopposed into Kabul, many of the journalists who had flourished in the relative freedom of the preceding 2 decades knew they would have to flee for their lives. They turned to CPJ in the hundreds. Such was the demand that nearly every member of CPJ's relatively modest staff dropped what they were doing and focused on the evacuation.
Afghan journalists worked incredibly hard over the past 20 years to build a thriving media industry that consisted of hundreds of newspapers, broadcasters, blogs, magazines, radio stations. In a very short amount of time, all of the work that Afghan journalists had put into building this thriving media industry came under a great deal of threat.
Afghanistan is one of the world's most dangerous countries for journalists. In the last 6 months, 15 media workers have been killed in the region.
Throughout 2021, in expectation of the withdrawal of U.S. forces from Afghanistan, the Committee to Protect Journalists was trying to understand who were the journalists who were in the country who were going to be at the most risk following the withdrawal, and what can we do to help them?
It was obvious the Taliban was advancing militarily. A lot of people looked ahead and saw this is not going to end well.
Everyone began to ask for help, saying just the fact that I'm a journalist makes me be in a lot of trouble.
Around August 15th, when the Taliban took control of Kabul, that's when we just received a an unbelievable number of requests for help.
I must leave my country. I can't live here.
Why can't you? It's not safe for you?
I am journalist. If they know, I know they will kill me. I love my country, but I can't stay here.
We realized it was going to be a really big crisis for not just the Asia team, but all of CPJ.
We have our person in Nairobi, we have someone in Spain, we have someone in Colombia. Everyone came together to work on the Afghanistan crisis.
We were on high alert. We were working around the clock, fielding requests, thousands of them.
This has been the worst crisis CPJ has had to deal with. We were sort of holding our breath with the people trying to get to the airport.
As an organization, in this critical moment, we had one mission: to provide safe passage to as many journalists as we possibly can.
There would be, I would say, scores, if not hundreds, of people who would still be stuck there if it weren't for the efforts of CPJ.
We take a lot of satisfaction in the people we have helped to get out and resettle. But there's so many more people. I get messages from journalists every day that say, I'm about to be killed. Can you help me get out of the country?
Since the Taliban takeover, attacks against the press in Afghanistan have included beatings, arrests, shootings, and other forms of violence against journalists.
The Taliban has introduced a new set of rules. What it amounts to is full control of the media.
You think a journalist can stay in Afghanistan? When I sat in the airplane, I said to myself in my heart, now you don't have anything.
One of the most important things that we do is let journalists know that they are not alone. Let them know that we're here and we're going to do whatever it takes to help them.
Right now, after the kind of initial chaos and crisis, CPJ is continuing to help journalists who are in Afghanistan. For many journalists who have left, we are now providing them with exile support to live while they get on their feet and start their new life.
It's really rewarding to have real impact on the lives and safety of journalists and to help the cause of press freedom around the world.
When the Taliban rolled into Kabul, the city, it had blossomed in the interim. Afghanistan has changed. And I think the hope is that many of the things that have changed in civil society, including an active media, highly independent, highly critical, well-trained journalists, will find a way to persist.
For one pioneering broadcaster in Myanmar, military repression has come full circle. A. Chan Naing founded the Democratic Voice of Burma nearly 30 years ago. From exile in Norway, he ran an underground network of reporters in Myanmar and beamed shortwave radio broadcasts into the country that was then under army rule. The promise of democracy and media freedom under leader Aung San Suu Kyi lured reporters to work above ground, and A. Chan Naing returned home. His group flourished, and even set up a television station inside Myanmar after years of broadcasting only on satellite. Then came the military coup of February this year. The Democratic Voice of Burma's broadcasts from inside the country were silenced, but it still manages to put out programming over the internet.
Years of freedom and semi-democratic rule have come to an abrupt end.
Before I was born, Burma was a parliamentary democratic system. The media were pretty much free. But then the military came into power in 1962 with the coup. The journalists were not allowed to write anything against the military or against the government. I came out to Thailand in 1988. I had no formal training, but I tried to learn from foreign journalists. And then I was recruited to Democratic Voice of Burma, which started in Oslo in 1992 as a radio station. So in the early days, it was very basic. We have to improvise. From 1988 until 2012, the media inside the country was totally controlled by the regime. So we started feeling like independent news is very important for people inside the country.
Prior to 2012, there was no free press. After 2012, a lot of these exile media moved into Myanmar, and there was a lot of hope at that time for press freedom and democracy. But over time, we've seen a lot of attacks on the press and the erosion of press freedom. Since the military coup in Myanmar on February 1st, press freedom has basically been destroyed. The military's in control. They want to control the information that gets to the Burmese people. They want to control the information that gets outside the country. Aichan is one of the people who has a lot of experience managing stealth operations, and that's what we're seeing now. Journalists are operating underground. Some have gone into exile. And so we're still getting reports out of Myanmar. It's impressive, frankly, to watch the scale and sophistication of what they're able to do.
Without the international organization like CPJ, the attention for the journalists inside Burma would be very little. Almost like nobody would know about what's happening.
The journalists inside Myanmar are in a lot of jeopardy. And one of CPJ's roles is to help journalists be able to do their work safely. We have a big voice. It gets a lot of attention when we write something, and we try to amplify that voice. Aichan, he's really a visionary of the free media in Myanmar. He's a pioneer of providing accurate information to the Burmese people.
You can see nowadays, not just in Burma, but in international whole community, the independent media shrinking, and that is pretty dangerous. Our mission is to inform the idea of democracy and human rights through unbiased and objective news to the people of Burma. So it's my main job to regroup and to rebuild our newsroom and finding the way of keeping the whole organization alive.
It has crossed my mind that had my life not taken the path it has, I might well have pursued a career in journalism. But looking around the room tonight, maybe not. I'm not sure I have that kind of facility with words. Concision, is that a word? Compression. The tenacity to wait outside locked doors for the truth to be let out of whatever prison it is in this week. Ask Mohammed Mosaid about that. You are the fourth estate. You are all we have between democracy and demagoguery, between facts, fabrication, between truthfulness and truthiness. That's right, truthiness. Thank you. I just want to say thank you. Please stay strong, stay safe, make our lives difficult when you have to. We need you and the committee to protect journalists even more than we ever have. You know this. Thank you, thank you.
I'm Joel Simon,
the Executive Director of CPJ. The journalists we are honoring today have been sustained by a fierce belief in the justness of their cause and the power of an informed society. They have risked their lives and liberty to bring us the news. We are reminded by their sacrifice that to practice journalism in the face of grave danger requires a profound sense of optimism and a sincere faith in humanity. The best among our profession share this worldview. It is a belief that the people, once informed, will make the right choices for themselves and their communities. They will parse the lies, they will refuse to be misled, they will hold their leaders accountable, they will fight for justice. Maybe not today, but someday. It is this kind of stubborn optimism that has sustained me in my role as CPJ Executive Director. Despite the setbacks, despite the losses, despite the heartache, I have always believed and continue to believe that a free society and a free people require a free press. People everywhere in the world deserve this, and we must continue the fight on their behalf. I thank all of those who have accompanied me on this journey for nearly a quarter century, and I thank all of those who have supported CPJ this evening.
In 1997, after a decade of reporting in Latin America, Joel Simon joined the Committee to Protect Journalists. He began to rise through the ranks, and for the last 15 years has been CPJ's Executive Director, leading the growth of the organization to become one of the most credible, strong, and powerful advocates for press freedom in the world. Now, as Joel begins the next chapter of his professional life, we have so much to thank him for. Hundreds of journalists around the world can thank Joel and his team for their freedom, and I thank Joel for his personal and professional friendship over the years. He's been a remarkable advocate for press freedom and for journalists in trouble. And for that, Joel, we sincerely thank you.
Each year, the Committee to Protect Journalists gives an award in honor of the late Gwen Ifill for extraordinary and sustained achievement in the cause of press freedom. Consistently defying the might of the Chinese Communist Party censorship machine definitely qualifies under that heading. And that is what Hong Kong publisher Jimmy Lai has been doing ever since the Tiananmen Square massacre in 1989. Jimmy's outspoken newspaper, Apple Daily, has been in Beijing sites ever since its founding 26 years ago. Its support of democracy, the rule of law, and Hong Kong street protests was too much for the autocrats who expected the media to surrender to Communist Party rule. The paper was shut down, and Jimmy put behind bars.
Protests calling for widespread democratic reforms in Hong Kong appeared to take the authorities by surprise. Beijing's solution has been a draconian state security law.
Offenders can face up to life in prison. Even non-citizens can be deemed to have violated this law.
Local journalists fear it is just the beginning of a wider crackdown on press freedom.
All reports related to the 2019 protests have been wiped.
The more voices in Hong Kong that go quiet, the more his stands out.
Apple Daily is Hong Kong's largest media outlet, and its owner, Jimmy Lai, an outspoken advocate for democracy.
Jimmy Lai is one of the city's most prominent democracy advocates.
My name is Sebastian Lai. I'm Jimmy Lai's son. The China that Dad grew up in, it was an incredibly tough time. Tiananmen Square massacre was a pivotal point for him. That's the moment when Dad decided to be involved in politics. There's an ad when Apple Daily launched, and it's Dad with an apple on his head, and he gets riddled with arrows. And at the end of it, he grabs the apple and he takes a bite. You know, do you stay in Eden or do you bite the apple of truth, right? I remember going to the offices. As a kid, I was shown the printing presses, and the experience of going there, of seeing these incredible machines and this building just bustling full of people. At its height, it must have employed somewhere close to 4,000 people. He believed that information was freedom. And Founding a media group was a way to accelerate this idea of a democratic society.
Is there not a chance that you could be spirited away in the middle of the night to a prison in mainland China?
Yes. But what can I do? Just keep quiet?
You don't sound scared by that.
I can't be scared. If I'm scared, what can I do?
There's actually a Cantonese phrase, 怕你我仲使做人. If I'm scared of you, am I still a person? We believe that if you can't say what you want to say, write what you want to write, and read what you want to read, then that's a huge part of human dignity that's taken away from you, right? He always tells me that Hong Kong gave him everything. Most people had pride in being from Hong Kong. Like, we have these freedoms. So I think for him, standing up for it was like standing up for his home. The decision to stand up for it was almost instinctive.
This is just living my life peacefully. But if I'm in jail, I'm living my life meaningful.
A developing story out of Hong Kong. Police have arrested media tycoon Jimmy Lai in the highest profile use of the new national security law there.
Hundreds of police raided the building of Lai's company Next Media. Several of the company's executives were also arrested.
I knew it would come. I did not know that would be so fast.
Jimmy Lai faces life in prison if found guilty of collusion with a foreign country.
We just received notice that Apple Daily will publish its final edition tonight, so I'm rushing back to the office.
As a photojournalist, I witnessed the collapse of Hong Kong and its most frustrating era.
He's been in jail since having been denied bail at the end of December 2020. On April in 2021, he was sentenced for 14 months. He taught me many lessons. Obviously, the value to stand up for what you believe in. It's something that he is now leading by example. It's something that makes me very proud to be his son. It's a great honor for my father to receive the Gwen Ifill Award from the Committee to Protect Journalists. There's a lot of people, going through this. It brings attention to what's happening in Hong Kong. And so it makes you feel some sense of solidarity, I guess. It's very inspiring that there's other people standing up for the truth.
Thank you for joining us and paying tribute to these courageous journalists and publishers from around the world. And please continue to support the Committee to Protect Journalists and the fight for press freedom. Thank you, and good night.